Hello everyone, have a nice day. Today we're going to explore a warm, funny moment between James and Diep, a simple driving lesson on a quiet rural road that slowly turns into something much deeper. You'll see Diep's nervous hands on the handlebars, James's gentle teasing that makes her laugh, and the way their small happiness grows into courage. But just when the night feels peaceful, sweet potatoes by the fire, soft promises, and honest feelings, James's father becomes the shadow behind the phone call, threatening to pull them apart again. If you find this story interesting, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. Now, let's get into it. The scooter lurched forward, barely a heartbeat, and Diep gasped like it had tried to steal her soul. She slammed the brakes so hard the front dipped, and the pale yellow scooter froze on the empty rural road with an offended little squeak. For 1 second, her eyes went huge, then she snapped her head toward James, cheeks burning under her helmet. James stared, stunned, and then his mouth twitched. He tried to hold it in. He failed. "My love," he said, lifting both hands like a man surrendering. "You stopped like the scooter just insulted your entire family." Diep blinked. "Because it did. It jumped." "It didn't jump," he said, stepping closer, voice soft and teasing. "It listened to you. Your hands just shouted." "My hands are scared," she muttered, then frowned at herself like she hated sounding small. The late afternoon light lay golden over the rice fields. The road beside her bamboo house was quiet enough that even their laughter felt loud. James kept to her left side, close enough to catch her if she wobbled, careful enough not to make her feel like a child. "Okay, sweetheart," he said, gentling his tone into teacher mode. "We breathe first, then mirror, brake, throttle, little, like you're petting a cat." Diep snorted. "Cats scratch." "Then like you're holding warm tea," he corrected, smiling. "Careful, calm." She nodded, determined. She pushed the scooter forward. It didn't move. Diep stared at it, offended, as if it had personally betrayed her. "See? Angry." James turned away and covered his mouth, shoulders shaking. "Diep, you forgot the kickstand." Her eyes widened. Then she lifted her chin with dramatic dignity. "I was testing you, James." "Of course you were," he said solemnly, crouching down to flip it up. "And I passed. I'm honored." Diep climbed back on, posture stiff. James didn't touch her, just held the air near her like a promise. "Right hand," he reminded gently. "A little throttle. Left hand gentle brake. And your eyes stay forward." Diep rolled forward, slow as a careful secret. The scooter hummed. Her shoulders loosened a fraction. She stole a glance at James. He immediately pointed at the road, pretending to scold. "Eyes forward, darling. The road gets your focus. I already have your heart." Diep's lips twitched, trying not to smile. "Don't say things like that when I'm trying not to die." "You're not dying," he said, laughing softly. "You're learning." He placed a small stone farther ahead. "Okay, ride to the stone and stop." Diep nodded, serious now. She went forward and stopped a full meter before it, gripping the brake like it was the only loyal thing in her life. James tilted his head. "Why so far?" Diep swallowed, voice smaller. "Because if I get too close, you'll worry." His smile faded into something tender and fierce. He stepped closer, eyes warm behind his glasses. "I don't worry when you get close," he said quietly. "I worry when fear makes you stand alone." Diep looked down at her hands on the handlebars. The scooter wasn't her real fear. It never had been. "It's your father," she whispered. James's jaw tightened at the name, but he didn't let anger touch his voice. "I know, baby." "He thinks I'm not enough," she said, breath trembling. "That loving me is a mistake." James reached up and adjusted her helmet strap, quick, respectful, grounding. "Listen to me," he said, soft but unwavering. "You are not a mistake. You are the bravest person I know. Today isn't about proving anything to him. It's about you feeling safe, free." Diep blinked fast, then let out a shaky laugh. "Free? While the scooter judges me," James grinned. "It judges me too. I'm just pretending I don't care." That finally made her laugh real bright, surprised, alive, and for a few minutes the road felt like it belonged to them. By dusk, she guided the scooter back and parked it properly, kickstand included. James clapped like she'd won an award, making her roll her eyes and smile anyway. Near the porch, they built a small fire and wrapped sweet potatoes in foil. The flames painted their faces warm orange, and the bamboo walls held the quiet like a shelter. Diep warmed her hands, eyes lost in the fire. "What if he never accepts me?" she asked softly. "Then we build a life that doesn't need his permission," James said, leaning closer. "I choose you, over and over." The potatoes crackled. James reached too soon, yelped, and shook his fingers dramatically. Diep burst out laughing. "Slow down, coach." "I got confident because you're inspiring," he said, grinning, soot smudged on his cheek. She leaned in and wiped it off with her fingertips, quick, gently. James went still, eyes dropping to her hand like it was the most precious thing in the world. Then his phone vibrated sharp, cold, out of place. James looked down at the screen, and the warmth in his face tightened. Diep's smile faded. "James?" she whispered. "Is it him?" James didn't answer right away. He stared at the screen as if the name could bite, then flipped the phone face down on the bamboo step like he was refusing to let it sit between them. Diep's smile faded into worry. "James." He reached for her hand, warm and steady. "Yeah," he admitted softly. "It's him." Diep swallowed. "You should call back." "I will," he said, "but not like this. Not with you sitting here feeling like you're about to be judged in your own home." Her fingers tightened around the foil-wrapped sweet potato. "I'm used to being judged." James's eyes hardened for a second, then softened again the moment he looked at her. "That's exactly what I hate," he whispered. "You shouldn't have to be used to that." The fire popped, a breeze carried smoke upward, and for a moment the glow made Diep's face look younger, gentler, like the version of her that still believed love could be simple. She tried to laugh, but it came out thin. "Your father, he always chooses the perfect time, like he waits until I'm finally happy." James gave a low, humorless chuckle. He thinks timing is power. "And he has power," Diep said quietly. "Money, reputation, people listen." James squeezed her hand. "People listen because they're afraid of him," he said. I'm not. Diep looked up, searching his face. You say that now, but he's your father. He's my father, James agreed, voice calm, but he doesn't get to be the owner of my life. Diep's throat tightened. I don't want to be the reason you lose your family. James leaned closer until the warmth of his shoulder brushed hers. My love, he said gently, you're not taking anything from me. You're giving me something I never had peace with. She blinked fast, tears threatening. Peace? She repeated, almost disbelieving. James nodded toward the road, the bamboo house, the quiet night. Out there, everything is meetings and titles and people pretending, he said. Here, you laugh at me when I burn my fingers. Here, you wipe soot off my face like it's normal. That's peace. Diep tried to hide her smile. You were being reckless. I was hungry, he corrected, grinning, and she let out a small laugh that sounded like relief. Then her expression fell again. What did he say? In the message. James hesitated, and that hesitation was louder than any words. He picked up the phone, read for a second, then exhaled slowly. He wants me to come home tonight, James said. Now, Diep's chest tightened, because he knows you're here. He always knows, James said, eyes flicking briefly toward the dark road as if expecting headlights. He has people. He has ways. Diep's voice dropped. Then it's dangerous. You should go. James turned to her fully. Listen, he said softly. I'm not scared of him. I'm scared of you thinking you have to push me away to protect me. Diep looked down. I don't want to push you away, she whispered. I don't want you to regret me. James lifted her chin with one finger, careful, affectionate. I don't regret you, he said. I regret every day I let him make you feel small. Diep's eyes shimmered. James, he smiled gently. You did so well today, he said, voice brightening on purpose. You learned throttle control, braking, balance, and you learned not to touch hot potatoes, Diep murmured, finally smiling. Exactly, he laughed. We both improved. The warmth between them settled again, soft, safe, real. Diep leaned her head against his shoulder, and James rested his cheek lightly on her helmet, like he didn't care how it looked, like he only cared how it felt. Then the phone vibrated again, harder this time. A second call. James didn't flinch, but Diep did. Her hand slipped under his, holding tighter. Please don't fight with him, she whispered. Not because I'm afraid of him, because I'm afraid of what it does to you. James closed his eyes for a beat, taking her words in like breath. Okay, he said quietly. No fight. He picked up the phone, but instead of answering, he stood and held his other hand out to her. Come with me, he said. Diep blinked up at him. Where? James's smile was tender, but there was steel underneath it. If he wants to talk, he said softly, then he can hear my voice while I'm standing in front of the woman I love.
Trên con đường quê yên tĩnh bên cạnh căn nhà tre của Diệp, James dạy Diệp lái chiếc xe tay ga màu vàng nhạt, biến những nỗi lầm rụt rè của cô thành tiếng cười và sự tự tin. Những lời trêu chọc nhẹ nhàng và sự hướng dẫn tận tình của anh giúp cô vượt qua nỗi sợ hãi. Nhưng căng thẳng thực sự không phải là chiếc xe tay ga mà là cha của James, người không chấp thuận mối quan hệ của họ và dùng áp lực để kiểm soát. James trấn an Diệp rằng tình yêu của anh không phải là một sự trao đổi và cô không nợ bất cứ ai bằng chứng về giá trị của mình. Thay vì tranh cãi, James đưa ra một lựa chọn táo bạo, đối mặt với cuộc trò chuyện mà không che giấu tình yêu của họ. Khoảnh khắc ấm áp thân mật của họ bị gián đoạn khi James nhận được một cuộc gọi và tin nhắn khẩn cấp từ cha anh. James đã bình tĩnh xử lý và cả hai có một ngày ấm áp bên nhau.